Nowadays, we have become addicted to vibrant experiences. We are emotional drug addicts, living based on emotions, and suddenly our lives are solely subject to those emotions. This generates a great sense of frustration and emptiness. How our mind works and how our brain functions in such an important moment of society's digitalization. This conference wouldn't be the same prepared a year ago as it is prepared now, where life circumstances have forced us to adapt strongly, directly, overwhelmingly to the digital world. But by understanding how the mind works and how it relates to the screen, we will be able to manage this digital world that is currently filling our lives much better. Happiness depends on the meaning each of us gives to our lives in a society that has often lost its meaning, often lost its direction. We have replaced meaning with sensations. Sensations that are not always terrible, but some are bad. They can be food, massages, social media, pornography, sex, drugs, online gambling, shopping. These sensations are not always disruptive, but they destroy us when they replace the true meaning of life. Nowadays, we have become addicted to vibrant experiences. We are emotional drug addicts, living based on emotions. We have what is called the cult of the instant. We care about what we feel now, and sometimes we are not capable of letting our brain, our prefrontal cortex that is able to discern good from bad, what is interesting, make decisions. Our lives suddenly become solely subject to those emotions, that constant drug given to us on the screen, those sensations we talked about a few minutes ago. This generates a great sense of frustration and emptiness, because all those strong emotions we talked about, many of them are pleasurable, and it's important that we understand this. A few years ago, Facebook co-founder Sean Parker admitted at a medical event in Philadelphia, he said, "We created Facebook to generate addicts." And he recognized that we realized the vulnerability of human beings, the need human beings have to feel loved, appreciated, recognized. Because let's not forget that nothing motivates humans as much as feeling loved, feeling that others matter. And they created the like button. They created Facebook. Every time one consumes heroin, cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, engages in pornography, all of that generates pleasure, and pleasure is modulated in our brain by a hormone called dopamine. Dopamine works like this. I want to have a drink while I'm imagining how I'm going to go have that drink with friends at a bar. Automatically, dopamine starts to rise. It reaches its highest point when I consume alcohol, and then dopamine starts to decrease until it generates a feeling of emptiness that we all know, where I want more. That's how dopamine works. It activates when I start to crave something. It peaks when I consume it. And when I stop consuming it, I need more. Every time I receive a like, every time I have interactions on social media where I feel loved, where there is all that feedback like, you received a message, this may interest you. Those likes and notifications generate sparks of dopamine in me. Those sparks of dopamine are generated by all of this. The digital world functions very similarly to drug consumption. In fact, today, psychiatrists work with cocaine addiction using very similar drugs that we use for addictions to social media, pornography, or video games because the mechanism of action is very similar. But what generates that emptiness? That emptiness we feel when we stop consuming, frustration and emptiness, that void, that feeling that nothing is worth it, and we go back to the beginning, where is the meaning of my life? Because I can't find it, and then I need to search for more, I need more, and the brain nowadays is changing when we look at each one of us, we are at what moment in three general circumstances. The first is when we work, leave that aside, and there are others. It's stress and boredom. Who hasn't seen themselves on the bus stop staring at their phone waiting to go into the doctor's office? Pick up the phone, get mad at their husband, wife, partner, father, mother, and suddenly pick up the phone because the applications were designed to relieve, meaning the application, the screen was designed to provide relief to us. And we have all experienced that moment when we are tired, stressed, can't take it anymore. And we need the screen, whether it's to browse news portals for sports, a website to buy clothes, a photo-sharing social network like Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it may be, because suddenly, you don't know why, you feel better. Because it's designed to relieve stress and boredom, which are basic in human beings. And I often explain this to parents when they ask me about their children. One of the things I tell them is super important, that the people who succeed in life today, and when they succeed, they are in control of their lives, maintain a certain inner balance, connect healthily with what happens to them, are the ones who know how to manage their stress and boredom, because if you give your child a phone from a very young age, it's like putting a minibar in their room and saying, whenever you're bored or stressed, don't worry, you can have a drink, a beer, a shot, which all seems excessive or not. Well, the screen generates a similar process. But the same thing happens with adults. If we use the phone, the screen every time we're stressed and bored, two things happen. First, we create a society with zero tolerance for frustration. Because I want something and I want it now. I want sex, and I have Tinder. I want pornography, and I have any porn app I want to buy. And I have online shopping that arrives the next day with Amazon Prime I want to eat. And I have a meal that arrives at my house in 20 minutes. I don't know how to wait. I don't know how to get bored. I don't know how to postpone reward. It's the era of immediacy, and the only two things that give happiness in this life are the closest things to happiness that we can find. One has to do with love, with work. And love and work are not instant gratification. They require effort, consistency, affection, dedication, time, and the opportunity to postpone that reward. If we want to be what we call happy on this earth, we have to learn to postpone the reward. And postponing the reward, and here I show you this image where you see a brain, the front part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is basic, and I would love for those listening to me to remember this that I'm going to explain. The prefrontal cortex is the area responsible for attention, concentration, problem-solving, and impulse control. In other words, it handles almost everything in this life. It's what helps us have willpower, pay attention, overcome difficulties because we see possible solutions. When a baby is born, the baby's prefrontal cortex is completely undeveloped, meaning it's considered immature. The brain develops from the back to the front, although a baby's prefrontal cortex is activated with three things: light, sound, and movement. And now that I have a baby, I see it clearly with the baby. You play some music, someone passes by, you turn on some little lights, and the baby turns their head, meaning their prefrontal cortex is activated. But what do you want from your child? What do we want from these babies, from children nowadays? As the prefrontal cortex of these children develops with activity, the child also starts to pay attention. In other words, their prefrontal cortex activates in response to still objects, things that are not luminous, things that don't have a loud noise, meaning that the child can pay attention to a teacher, listen to a conversation with their parent, sit calmly in the waiting room of the doctor's office, meaning they have a well-established prefrontal cortex. What happens if you give that baby a tablet? If you give that child a phone, which is the tablet, which is the phone, light, sound, and movement. And our brain works with a mechanism called use it or lose it. For those of you listening who have had a phone and look up everything on the internet, has your memory improved? None, because as we use the internet, Wikipedia for everything, our hippocampus, which is the brain region responsible for learning, gets smaller. Who among us navigates better now than 10 years ago? Now that we have Google Maps, Waze, or any map application? None. Because our brain, when it's not stimulated enough internally, the brain areas atrophy and function worse. The same thing happens with the prefrontal cortex. If I only activate the prefrontal cortex with light, sound, and external movement, my prefrontal cortex won't develop properly, and we're raising a generation that is experiencing a lack of attention, lack of concentration, with a lot of impulsiveness, and zero tolerance for frustration. We have a 10% of the population in the developed world being treated psychiatrically with medications for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Lack of attention and lack of impulse control, meaning my prefrontal cortex is failing. That prefrontal cortex that is essential for postponing rewards, for making decisions, is progressively functioning worse. Those who succeed today are the masters of attention. In the 21st century, we have attention crises where we are unable to focus. In fact, what drives the world today isn't just drugs, mafias, pharmaceuticals, weapons, but also the ability to hold the user's attention for as long as possible on a screen. And when they have our screen and have us hooked, they start deteriorating us. You might ask, what can we do? Firstly, turn off notifications so nothing lights up on my phone unless I want something and I open the phone, not the phone telling me to open it. If it's not the phone that dominates me, it's the screen. My prefrontal cortex is completely flattened, lacking creativity, unable to respond to stimuli. So, if I could get a tenth of those listening to turn off notifications, the first 10,000 would make a big difference. In 4 or 5 days, you'll realize you live much more peacefully. Secondly, reduce the use of the most active social network, which is usually Instagram, to a maximum of 15 minutes, half an hour, or an hour per day, depending on each person. Because nobody goes on Instagram to look at a particular photo or thing, it's designed to hook us more and more. We know it works through dopamine and instant gratification, designed to be addictive. Thirdly, try to occasionally switch on airplane mode, truly engaging when you're with someone, having all your senses focused only on that person, giving them your full attention. It's challenging, but it's worth it today. Nowadays, we know that when we have the phone in our hand and we are talking to someone, the person we are talking to often feels a sense of slight abandonment. This is being observed with children. Studies are beginning to show that children feel abandoned by their parents whenever they are on their devices. We must be able to let go of them to set good, non-toxic examples and let them know that we are present with them. One of the phrases that was repeated the most during the lockdown was, "If you can't go outside, go inside and analyze your inner self. Connect with your inner self, meditate, pray if you have beliefs, seek the best within you." Nowadays, everything is external. We don't have time to slow down, to pause, to analyze our inner selves. Many times, if we cut off that hyperstimulation, that excess of information that bombards us, we can achieve serenity. I don't know anyone, I have read a lot throughout my life, who has discovered anything significant in a frantic moment of hyperactivity or hyperstimulation. Whether it was someone sitting under a tree and seeing an apple fall, like Aristotle strolling through the gardens of Greece, all the great discoveries in history have happened in moments of peace, of serenity, moments of calm. Those who manage to find meaning in the small things gain strength for adversity.